It is hot.
I feel the heat.
It's heat,
and I feel the heat, and I feel the cheapness. Is it cheap in here, or is it just me?
Yeah, this shirt was free, so yeah, this is cheap. Let me tell you something. We are talking cheap heat in this segment. We talk about trending topics in the pro wrestling world. We talk about WWE, AEW, NWA, movies, NFL, whatever is associated with wrestling and certain things that are happening. We make short videos out of them. Done pretty well, I'd have to say, for the channel, because the trending topics, YouTube loves that stuff. So we're going to be talking about trending topics here, and I'll have Dom share his screen.
Okay, this is MJF, the AEW World's Champ right now, Maxwell Jacob Friedman. He was inducted into the National Jewish Sports Hall of Fame and Museum in Commack, New York. He's only 27 years old, but he's already done so much. They did mention that he was a high school athlete as well. But being on the grand stage there of pro wrestling, he's been fantastic. He is tremendously athletic. You watch AEW, I see him occasionally in clips. You've been impressed by him and his title reign. Surprised by this at all? These guys are real athletes, right? Pro wrestlers are real athletes. We know that.
Yeah.
What say you here?
I think a lot of his work currently toward the anti-Jewish hate movement, I think it's probably what probably got him in. And he's been pretty outward, and now that he's a babyface, it's probably a good move to kind of put him in this spotlight here. Yeah, so ultimately,
does he get inducted if he's still a heel?
I know. If he was still a heel, would he go in? I did really like his line where he talked about how he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, he kept it, and he sent out a tweet about this. And what he
there
said,
it is.
Yeah.
I can't put into words what today meant. Rampant discrimination and bigotry seen worldwide. I proudly say I'm not just a Jew, I'm a human. We should all treat each other as such. So it sounds like he's, this is a shoot here. And then, except me, I deserve special treatment because I'm a Hall of Fame level human. So now it's a work.
Right.
MJF, his life is now a shoot and a work simultaneously. Is this the second coming of Vince McMahon?
Right. His life is a shoot and a work.
It's both.
The great smart-ass line there at the end. Because if he just left it like the line where he just sort of like, oh yeah, like we're all humans, blah 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 blah, and like that would be it. Mm-hmm. That's more like a John Cena thing, and with the smart ass line at the end, that feels more MJF.
Yeah,
as he says, his new line now is "I'm your scumbag."
Okay,
like that's his like, and the
emphasis on the word "your," like because the crowd is behind him.
Yeah.
He's just a scumbag, but now he's like the people's champ. He's the people's scumbag.
The crowd chants, "You're our scumbag."
Okay, there you go. All right, AEW getting into it there.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he didn't look up to the likes of Paul Heyman and Goldberg. Goldberg, who we saw spearing a very unfortunate college intern for the Falcons last week. By the way, the Atlanta Falcons 0-2. Since Goldberg speared that poor marketing intern.
Yes, they got killed by the worst team.
Also here, joins a family member, NFL player Benny Friedman. I did not know this. I've heard Benny Friedman's name. I don't know much about him, but I had no idea that there was a family connection there. So good for him. MJF's had a lot of stuff go right for him in 2023. So this may be the best time if you're going to do this kind of thing to put him in your Hall of Fame. Because who knows? He may lose the belt. He may turn heel. A lot can happen in pro wrestling, especially when your life is both a shoot and a work.
Yeah, he can get real stale. And people are like, oh, he was really hot then, but now he's not. So I say pretty interesting stuff here. And
so now Rey Mysterio is not the only Hall of Famer who continues to wrestle and have a belt.
Ray, the hardest working retired man in pro wrestling.
In pro wrestling, yes. Even as he recovers from his knee injuries on crutches, but apparently he's on the road to recovery. Speaking of other people on the road to recovery, Liv Morgan's been out of action for a while with injuries. She was arrested in Florida for having, I think, a vape pen, possession of marijuana not more than 20 grams, as well as a vape pen. This is kind of a follow-up on this. This comes to us from WrestleZone. Apparently has no heat with the WWE. Now, it may help that she's not currently involved in a TV program. She still is recovering. But the word here from the sources that they cite, Mike Johnson of PW Insight, PW Insider, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, say that whatever they have in mind for Liv Morgan's return, this has not thrown it off track or anything. They say that Liv can continue doing what she's doing, which for now seems to be rehabbing. I wonder if the marijuana was part of her rehab. I mean, it's better than being hooked on the pain medication that guys went through for decades and shortened their lifespans. So if that's part of her pain management as she recovers from whatever injury she has, it's understandable. There's no mention that she was pulled over or arrested for actually hurting anyone. So maybe that's another aspect of why she's not getting too much heat. She also seems to be very well liked behind the scenes. Not much to say here of it. We each saw this story independently and sent it to each other. Oh, did you hear about Liv Morgan getting pulled over? What say you about this? Because it's always a fine line with the WWE, with substance abuse, wellness policy. Marijuana is still part of the policy, but the company no longer tests for it. So it's becoming a weird gray area in the WWE. Is this a case of the attitudes in the larger society changing, and so the WWE doesn't have to, virtue signal by, getting down real hard on a person who has a tiny amount of marijuana in a vape pen?
Yeah, I mean, it's legal. I was shocked that she even got arrested because we live in a state where it's legal, where people sell it at stores. So I'm like, oh, wait, it's illegal? It feels like an article from 15 years ago.
Right.
Oh yeah, they got caught with some weed. I was like, oh, that was an old, not to be. I think people are should be able to smoke. I think it's fine. But
sure.
And I say that because I look like a stereotypical stoner. I don't really smoke too much. I say really don't at all. But I look like a guy that would smoke a lot with the long hair and the beard and everything like that. But I think people should be allowed to do it. Ultimately, I thought they were allowed to do it. So I was kind of surprised when I saw this. And yeah, I feel like maybe 10, 15 years ago, it would be considered a big deal. But now, all right, well, let's move on. Maybe
everybody liked Liv before. Everybody still likes Liv. We'll get our jokes off and she'll get hers off, and nobody will be thinking about it soon enough.
Right. And I'll tell you what.
That's a very 2023 attitude, isn't it? Like you're saying, even a year or two ago, you'd be like, oh, the WWE, really? This is the WWE's response? Woo.
Right.
Speaking of injuries, it's the 1-year anniversary of the flop Dolla that you can see there. We were wondering at the time what would make him think he could do that. Apparently, it's the fact that he's done it before. AJ Francis, former NFL player, former top Dolla in the WWE, released recently in the Cuts in the Fall. On the anniversary of this, says, "The botch saved my life. I made that dive a dozen times before. Legs felt off, but I didn't think about it. After I failed and went to the doc and found out I had type 2 diabetes. My blood sugar was 626. I imagine that's a very high number. I almost lost my life and was about to lose both feet. The botch saved my life." So this story has a happy ending. I don't know, man. AJ Francis really looking on the bright side of everything, but he has reason to. I mean, we don't. Again, we think of all the medical tests and checkups these guys go through, but sometimes it's not enough. I mean, they check these guys for muscle pulls, breaks, sprains, concussions. They're not really testing guys backstage every show for type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, right.
So something weird has to happen for this to be like, oh, maybe there's something really wrong with me. And the flop Dolla there is it. I'm letting it just play over and over on a loop, a 5-second loop here, just because it never gets old to me.
Right. No, keep it going. And let me tell you, Dom, we kind of bashed Top Dolla a lot while he was in the WWE. Mm-hmm. But, in all fairness, it's pretty cool that he's able to see like a positive for this botch. It's just a botch. It's just pro wrestling. Like it happens, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, it's cool that they actually found something. He's found a positive spin. And even if you look at the guy himself, he played in the NFL and he was in the WWE. Like, those are two amazing things to accomplish. So yes. Even though he wasn't the greatest worker on the planet and, was hidden away mostly for his tenure, he still got to do it. Like, I would have loved to do either of those things. So still a pretty cool thing to hang your hat on.
This is a real professional athlete, and frankly, I wouldn't be able to get over that top rope either.
Right. It's not as easy as it looks. So probably not he'll have to live with that one for a while. But hey, it's a cool positive spin. So kudos to Top Dolla.
We've talked Bloodline here. Kevin Sullivan, old WCW booker and creative, and in addition to being a wrestler, reveals what the Bloodline, the Four Horsemen, and the NWO early on had in common and what made them successful. He talks about there was only 4 guys in the group, and they didn't let the groups grow too much. This eventually got weird with the NWO. They grew too much, and it became, who's in the NWO, and is that guy really a top star who should be in it? They managed to kind of take the Bloodline as large as it could have gotten before pulling back with it, didn't they?
Yeah. Like
the Sami Zayn stuff was gold, but they couldn't stay there forever, and they found a way to get out of it, didn't they? Mm-hmm. This is a neat insight by a guy who knows a thing or two about doing these kind of things. If you're trying to make a faction of top guys, it's got to remain elite. Mm-hmm. It can't be just half the roster.
Right.
Had you thought about this aspect of it before reading this Kevin Sullivan piece here?
Well, I know the NWO got way out of control because they had the black and white and the red and black, and everybody was on one of the factions, and then there was WCW, but they were all like out of both the NWOs. So initially it was really good, and I always liked the black and white NWO black and white with Hulk Hogan because he was just so great as a heel. But I think it's a great point that he said that they built it too much, and it kind of got out of control because it got confusing, like who was on the NWO and who wasn't. And that's one thing I'm interested to see is when the Bloodline goes away, if Roman Reigns loses the belt at WrestleMania, where they go from there, like you mentioned earlier. So if we're going
Kevin Sullivan, talking about the NWO, I think they should have never gone past Six-Pac, who was X-Pac in WWE, Hulk, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, and managed by Ted DiBiase at the time. So really, this was had that group stuck around, maybe the NWO. I mean, they couldn't have done like the NWO takes over Nitro and takes over the broadcast, but maybe this would have been a better elite group. So interesting thing to talk about. It comes down to what's your purpose in creating the faction. If you're trying to keep them elite, then you have to keep it elite. You can't let just anybody in. Judgment Day is kind of going through this with JD McDonough. Mm-hmm. Can you really let a lackey into your group?
Well, it worked out really well for Sami Zayn when he was the lackey. But he was like the comic relief and the guy that didn't look like the rest of the bloodline. I mean, that was amazing, though.
That was amazing. And now the bloodline's kind of going in reverse. The bloodline wouldn't let in any people who were real lackeys. So now that they need the lackey angle, they've got to like take Jimmy Uso and make him sometimes almost a comedy wrestler, and take Solo Sikoa, and every now and then he just gets beat, or can't make it out of a match without a DQ. So they almost have to find ways to make the guys vulnerable, because for so long they were superheroes, the villain kind, but the superhero villains.